Hey everybody, come to you today to talk about my upcoming race. It's a 50 miler in Columbus, Georgia. It's called the Southern Fried 50. And what we're going to talk about today is I know that Kate is also putting her training plan out there, and there's a bunch of people that are taking part in it and are interested in it. And what I wanted to do today was offer up kind of how I'm approaching this race, how I'm incorporating lifting, and kind of what my emphasis is and how I plan to succeed at this race. So, for a 50 miler, this is obviously a very extensive race. If you're really good at that distance, it's taking you 6 hours, maybe less if the terrain allows for it. If you're someone like me, you're hopefully, fingers crossed, finishing in under 11 hours. I'm going to finish in 10 hours or something like that. At least that's the goal. That's the objective. And so because the race is so long, most of the intensity is very low. There's not a whole lot of opportunity to run really fast. There's not a lot of opportunity to really burn yourself out, especially on this course because it's very flat. So for the most part, it's a nutritional and kind of pacing game. And so because of that, the number one priority for me going into this in any sort of longer event, and this is I think true for everything from a half marathon or a marathon and up, is the number one emphasis is mileage. And this is going to be mostly zone 1, 2 if we're talking about heart rate. And so the reason this is important is because it's mimicking the race. Okay, so if I want to run 50 miles in 10 hours, I certainly need to run 50 miles in a week, right? Uh, while that may not be perfectly true, but the logic is there, is that my time spent at zone 1, 2 throughout a week, it's going to correlate very strongly to my success in a 50-mile race. This can be done through several different means. What I'm going to do is I'm going to run 6 days a week. Most of my runs are going to be zone 1 or zone 2. I will have 2, though, that will be at a threshold pace. And my threshold pace, I'm talking about a pace that the time to exhaustion is around 40 to 50 minutes. Okay, so I'll do intervals there. I'll do that twice a week, but that's not the emphasis of the program. The emphasis of the program is getting mileage and getting a large volume load of zone 1 to 2 training. That is going to dictate whether I can run 50 miles continuously on the race day. So my second most important facet of this training plan, okay, is going to be my threshold run. Zone probably 3 to 4. Now, while this doesn't directly relate to the 50-mile distance, because the 50-mile distance for me is a time to exhaustion of 10 hours. You know, the time to exhaustion at my threshold pace is going to be 40, maybe 50 minutes. What this does, though, is it raises that threshold where I start overproducing lactate. I can't keep up with the energy demand, and I start to fatigue. Right? There's now a timestamp put on my effort. If I keep going at that pace, eventually I'm going to fatigue and I'm going to slow down. My output is going to drop. So what this does is it raises the threshold at which I will start to fatigue, right? So say my VT1 that we talked about in the last video, my VT1 is here, and I do a bunch of threshold training. Now, hopefully, I'm pushing that threshold up so that now I can run at a faster pace before I start to produce more lactate and I start to fatigue. That's the idea behind the threshold run. So I'll do 2 of those of the week, and the way that I've distributed the training intensity is around this. It's around a 70-30 split of zone 1 and 2 to threshold. I'm not going to be doing any VO2 max intervals, nothing above my threshold. Being 12 or 13 weeks out, I don't know that there's a whole lot of time for it. So as of right now, this is kind of the strategy, is a 70-30 split. And you can call this 80-20, but that usually refers to 80% low intensity, 20% high intensity. In this case, it's going to be 70% low intensity, 30% kind of in the middle at that threshold pace. Okay. My third point, and because this race I'm going to run in August in Georgia. If you don't know anything about Georgia, it gets pretty hot here. So on the race day, the range of temperatures that can be felt is probably, most likely it's going to be above 90 degrees, most likely very humid. So the third emphasis, the third point, and this can even be swapped out for number 2, is going to be heat acclimation. Okay. And so I'm going to leverage my easy runs first, especially early in the plan, maybe for the first 4 weeks, 5 weeks. I'm going to leverage my shorter, maybe 3 to 5 mile runs, and I'm going to put those in the afternoon. That way I get exposure to the heat. They're easy runs, so I'm going to be running slowly anyways. And I'm just getting exposure to the heat and not dying. Okay. Seeing if I can hold a low intensity pace, something short, because on race day, I'm most likely going to have to hold that low intensity pace, that slow pace. I'm going to have to hold it for a really long time. And so this gives me an initial practice to get exposure to a slow pace, my race pace, and then add in the context of heat. Okay, so this is really can be switched with the threshold run, but for me, because I've done so much zone 2, the threshold run is going to be a very powerful stimulus. So it is going to increase my fitness a great deal with only a couple inputs. So this one is going to be first, because I think in the long run, in 12 weeks, it is going to pay off more than just heat acclimation alone. So that's why it is number 2. Other things I'll do for heat acclimation is I have a small sauna that I'll get a few exposures to a week. Not going to do this on the first or second week, but eventually I'll do it 3 times a week. And then the long, slow distance run, or the long run on the weekend, is going to be starting in the morning, but then be exposed to heat later in the day, much like the race. That'll be kind of the third way I weave in the heat acclimation part of this train up. And so the last emphasis, and this is really doesn't have much to do with running, but is to maintain my strength. So this is going to be done through, I'll have 4 days of lifting, 2 upper and 2 lower, pretty much the same exact split I usually keep. The volume is going to be much less. And the way I program, it's going to be more concurrent than unidirectional. Whereas in a unidirectional setup, I'll have entire blocks of training dedicated to a rep scheme or a method, or a 5x5, and I'll progress my 5x5, or I'll do 3x5 and 4x5 and 5x5. So I'm practicing the intensity at which you execute those reps of 5. Okay. In this plan, what I'm going to be doing is a set or 2 at a intensity where I can be doing speed work with a barbell on squat, bench, deadlift. And then I will be doing an intensity where I can lift something relatively heavy for a single, something relatively heavy for 1 set of 4, and then 1 set of 8. So this way I get exposure to different intensities along that force velocity curve. And I'm not kind of pigeonholed into one set and rep scheme, so that I kind of distribute out my exposure to intensities throughout an entire session, rather than concentrating into one block and then following that up with another block of a different set and rep scheme. Okay, so, and what I'll be doing is I'll be I'll be tracking kind of my heavy single, attaching an RPE to that. And actually, I'll be using velocity, but from the velocity, I can gauge the RPE. From there, I can estimate my 1RM. So I can literally track 1RM through the whole 12 weeks, 13 weeks. So this is the plan. My main concern for this 50 miler is mileage, getting zone 1 and zone 2 mileage. Okay. My second is having high quality threshold workouts where I'm fresh enough where I can hit that output, hit that interval, suffer a little bit, come back down with an easy pace, hit the interval again, and accumulate a lot of time at that hard pace. And hopefully lift VT1 and VT2 so that whenever I'm doing my easy runs, I can push them a little harder without producing a lot of lactate and eventually fatiguing. Okay. Heat acclimation is my third point. All of the strategies, whether it's leveraging easy runs in sauna first and then going to my long, slow distance run, right? All of those are integral into making sure that when the race day comes, I don't die whenever I go in the heat. I'm not a heat casualty. I don't have a heat injury. And then lastly, maintain my strength. This is obviously the last. These three are actually geared towards the race, but it's the experiment, and the thing that's interesting to me is being able to do both of these things simultaneously. And that way I get to manage the trade-off between strength and conditioning, or strength and endurance. This is interesting to me because we know these things are incongruent, or they're antagonistic, or they're at least not complementary. So this is why I'm doing this. If you're interested in this program, I can send it to you. Just comment, make sure you like and subscribe. And if you are interested, comment and we will get this to you. We'll get your email, we'll get you on our newsletter, and we'll make sure that you have this program. So until next time, see ya.